My husband did not know I was in the hallway when he told his friend the party was a formality. "I'm going to tell her tonight," he said. "I've already spoken to the lawyers. She has nothing in her name. She never worked a real job. She'll get the settlement and that's it." His friend said nothing. I heard the sound of ice in a glass. I smoothed my dress, the blue one I had worn to our 10th anniversary, let out twice since then, and I walked into the room. It was the 25th of April. 25 years to the day since David and I had stood in a church in the rain and made promises in front of 43 people. Our daughter had arranged the party, catered, flowers on every surface, a banner over the dining room arch that said, "Silver and still standing," which I thought even then was an odd choice of words. I smiled at the guests. I refilled glasses. I accepted compliments about the house, about the garden, about the life David and I had apparently built together. And I waited. He told me at 9:47. I know the time because the clock in the hall chimed the quarter hour just as he said my name in a particular way. The way that precedes bad news. Margaret. Not Maggie, not Love. Margaret. "I want a divorce," he said. "I've wanted one for 2 years. I should have told you before tonight, but I didn't know how." He said it quietly, credit to him. He did not make a scene. I suppose he thought that was courtesy. He said I had been a good wife, that we had grown in different directions, that there was no one else, which was not entirely true, but I let it pass. He said the lawyers had already drawn up the papers. He said I would be comfortable. I looked at him for a long time. He was 61 years old, silver at the temples, handsome still in the way of men who have been looked after. His shirt was French cuffed, the ones I had ordered for him from a tailor in Jermyn Street the previous Christmas. His shoes were the Italian ones. The watch on his wrist was the Longines I had given him for his 50th. He was immaculate. He always had been. I said, "All right." He blinked. I think he had expected tears. "All right," I said again. "We will speak to the lawyers." You have to understand what David thought our life was. He believed he had built it. He had a senior position at an architectural firm, a title on a door, lunches with clients. He believed his salary paid the mortgage, the school fees, the holidays to Tuscany, the cars on the drive. He believed this because I had allowed him to believe it. The truth was more complicated. My mother's name was Eleanor. She was the daughter of a man who had invested very quietly in a particular kind of industrial land in the north of England in the 1950s, and that land had become worth considerably more than anyone expected. When Eleanor died in 1997, she left her estate in trust, to me, not to David, to me, with a stipulation that the principal not be touched for 15 years. I was 37 when she died. David and I had been married for 8 years. I never told him the size of it. I thought at the time it was prudence. Later, I understood it was something older and quieter than that. When David's firm went through the restructuring in 2003, when his title changed and his package was quietly reduced, I began supplementing. Not conspicuously. The school fees simply continued. The mortgage continued. The life continued. I moved money through a separate account he did not think to examine because he had never had cause to look. I want to be honest about this. I did not do it to trap him. I did it because I loved him, and because I believed it was temporary, and because I did not want him to feel diminished. That was, I think, the first mistake. The second mistake was continuing after I stopped believing it was temporary. By 2010, his salary covered perhaps a third of our actual expenditure. By 2018, It was closer to a quarter. His firm was comfortable, his reputation was intact, and he had no idea that the life he presented to the world, the house in the village, the daughters through good schools, the 20 years of summer holidays, had been paid for largely by a woman he believed kept herself busy with garden committees and occasional consultancy work. I had never corrected that impression. It was, in retrospect, a profound failure of honesty. I see that now. I am not entirely sure what I was protecting. Him, perhaps. Myself, more likely. The version of the marriage I had decided to believe in. After the party, the house emptied quickly. Our daughter, she was 22, she had flown in from Edinburgh, found me washing glasses in the kitchen at 11:30. "Mum," she said. I told her I was fine. She did not believe me, which was correct. She sat on the counter the way she used to at 16 and said, "What are you going to do?" I told her I was going to finish the glasses, and then I was going to go to bed. What I did not tell her was that I had spent several months preparing for this eventuality. I am not a dramatic person, but I am an organized one. My mother was a solicitor before she retired, and she had raised me to believe that documentation was a form of love. You record what matters because memory fails and people change their stories. I had 4 files. They were kept in a solicitor's office in a nearby town, not the solicitor David used for his firm's work. In those files were 11 years of bank statements, transfer records, every school invoice, every mortgage supplement, every private arrangement I had made to keep our life running at the standard David had grown accustomed to. The total over that period was not a small figure. I had also, 3 months prior to the anniversary party, made some other arrangements. The house, which David believed was held jointly, had in fact been purchased using a loan from my trust, secured against my sole name, before David's restructuring made joint borrowing complicated. He had signed papers at the time. I am not certain he had read them carefully. I am not proud of that. I should have sat across a table from him years before and shown him the reality of our finances. I did not. That is something I carry. The meeting with the lawyers was 3 weeks after the party. David arrived with his solicitor, a confident younger man who began the meeting by outlining David's entitlements under a long marriage settlement. He used phrases like substantial contribution and legitimate expectation. He was not unkind. He was simply proceeding on the basis of what David had told him. What David had told him was that he had been the primary earner throughout the marriage. My solicitor, a quiet woman in her 50s, the kind of solicitor who speaks very slowly when she has something important to say, waited until he had finished. Then she placed the first file on the table. I watched David's face as my solicitor explained the trust. I watched it again as she explained the supplementary payments. I watched it a third time as she produced the mortgage document and indicated, quietly, that the property was held in my name alone. He did not shout. I want to be clear about that. David is not a man who shouts. What he did was go very still. The way a person goes still when the ground has shifted under their feet and they are not certain yet how far they are falling. His solicitor asked for a recess. They left the room for 20 minutes. My solicitor asked if I needed anything. I said a glass of water would be very kind. When David came back, he looked at me differently. Not with anger, exactly. With something that had no clean name. A reassessment. The recalibration of a man who has discovered that the story he has been telling about himself was not the story that was actually happening. How long? You said. Just that. I said, since your restructuring in 2003. He looked at his hands. 20 years. Nearly. He said, why didn't you tell me? That was the question I had been sitting with for years. I had rehearsed answers in the bath, on walks, during the garden committee meetings he thought I took too seriously. What I said was the simplest version of the truth. Because I thought it would break something between us that I wasn't ready to lose. And then time passed, and the silence became the shape of the marriage, and I did not know how to change it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I made you small. I said yes, and I let you. Those were the truest words spoken between us in perhaps 15 years. The divorce was settled quietly. There was no court. My solicitor and his solicitor exchanged documents over several months. David received a fair settlement, more than he had contributed, less than he had assumed. I do not say that with any satisfaction. I say it because it is accurate. He moved to a flat near his office. I stayed in the house. Our daughter speaks to both of us. Our younger daughter has found it harder. That is its own kind of grief, and it belongs to them, not to me. What I think about now is not the money. Money was never the point of the money. The point was silence. The years of it, the maintenance of a fiction that was meant to protect love and instead, slowly, in the way of all quiet things, replaced it. I made him small too, in my way. I kept him ignorant of the truth of our life. I chose his comfort over his knowledge, and I told myself it was kindness. And perhaps it was kindness, but it was not respect. You cannot respect someone you are protecting from reality. That is the thing no one tells you about a long marriage. The kindnesses accumulate, the protections accumulate, and one day you look across the dinner table at someone you have loved for a quarter of a century, and you realize that you have built a beautiful, detailed, structurally sound story about each other that bears very little resemblance to who either of you actually is. That is not cruelty. That is the quiet erosion of a thing that began with genuine love and was worn away by the willingness to maintain peace at the cost of truth. I am 60 years old. I live in the house on my own. The garden is better than it has ever been because I have time for it now. Our daughters visit. I make tea. Last spring, David came to collect some books he had forgotten. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, looking at the room the way you look at a place you once lived. You kept the clock, he said. It was my mother's, I said. He nodded. He took his books. At the door, he said, I'm sorry, Maggie. I said, so am I. And I meant it entirely. Not for the lawyers, not for the files, not for the settlement. For the years of saying nothing when something needed to be said. For the silence we both chose, every day, for 20 years. That is the only regret that has weight for me now. Not the money, not the party, not the way he said my name. The silence. The beautiful, expensive, irretrievable silence. If this story sat with you, if some part of it felt familiar, I hope you will ask yourself tonight, what truth is still waiting to be spoken? Not for justice, not for reversal, simply because the person across the table deserves to know who they are really living with. And so do you. If you found something in this story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you stay with us here on Voices of Quiet Souls, there are more stories waiting. Ordinary lives, quietly lived, carrying more than anyone knew.